This video serves a larger purpose than just the explanation I'm about to give you. So know that going in. The video itself is not necessarily the point of this recording, but since I'm recording it, I'll probably post it to let you guys hear. About Up Close and Acoustic and how it came about. After I'd gotten into radio, I I learned everything I possibly could in radio, starting with small time radio and working my way up to bigger stations. And that was all fun. But I always had in the back of my mind I'd like to do a music show. And I knew exactly what I didn't want to do. And what I didn't want to do was what I heard on every other radio station. Now, I live in the Philadelphia metro area, the greater Delaware Valley. And I can give you specific examples of what I didn't like, but I'm not here to trash other people. I'm here to explain why I do what I do and why I do what I do and why I used to do it a lot more, I guess, and why I'm not doing it as much now. I could not stand it when I would hear a music station interview a performer or band that was, let's say, coming through town on a tour. Forget the local band. Let's just take an example of a touring band. If a touring band would come into a local radio station, it was almost as if the host or the station or whatever you want to think of it as, was unprepared, was totally unprepared for this band or performer. And so you'd get the worst type of interview in the world. The, hey, how you doing? Oh, you're in town. Oh, you're playing tonight. Where you playing? That kind of nonsense. Now, I know that to go any further than that might be considered breaking the radio station's format. If it's a music station, you want to be playing music, but yet they would often have access to great acts coming through the city, and they would allow these opportunities to just escape, go away, without actually having a conversation with the band or with the performer. So I knew that's not what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I didn't want to do. And yet it would burn me. I still to this day take it personally, even though nobody meant it personally to me, that bands that I knew about would go into these bigger radio stations because they had a bigger voice than wherever I worked, or if I worked out of my house. They would go to these big radio stations and have one of these lame, terrible interviews with people who were known across the country, because some of the people who hosted these radio shows would have their programs syndicated across the country on, for example, public radio stations. The same way that Up Close and Acoustic gets syndicated on public radio stations to a very much smaller degree. These interviewers and these shows would have 200 affiliates. What I wouldn't give to have 20 affiliates. I get picked up by maybe 5 sometimes if I'm lucky, if I'm very lucky. Yet the quality of this show, Up Close and Acoustic, is far superior. The interview is always far superior. I hear it from every guest. This is great. It's nice to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. Might be the most intelligent radio interview I've ever done. These are things that I've actually heard from people, and not just, flash in the pans or, something like that. These are from long established acts have said things like this to me. And yet they also go to the larger station too, because the larger station has a voice. But I could never understand why they would bother. Why bother going to a radio station who may be syndicated to 200 stations, but the host and that host had a collection of people underneath him, a staff, or them or her, whoever. They would have a staff who could prepare them well before an interview came into the studio. Never happened. And the host would fumfer around and ask inane questions and the dopiest things and the things that nobody cared about. Myself as a listener, I would like smack myself in the head. It's like, why are you asking that inane question that helps nobody understand what the band is about, what the song is about, what the performer is about, what the songwriter is trying to do? Why aren't you asking intelligent questions? So when I decided to do Up Close and Acoustic, I tried to concentrate on a nice long form, call it interview or call it conversation. Usually, latter day Up Close and Acoustic episodes, it's more of a conversation. And I really like that. And the guests really like that. But it would drive me crazy that that format did not exist on the radio. And for the most part, still doesn't. There are some radio stations, some of them, one of them specifically on the West Coast, I think does a fantastic job. But local to me, it's you're left wanting quite often, and still. And I've named, I've made the mistake of naming hosts in the past and like getting clobbered because of it. And I'm not here to trash them personally. I'm trying to say, why aren't you doing a better job? You've been around radio for 40, 50 years. Why aren't you doing a better job? Yep, you get all these great interviews, and yet every time you get these interviews, you waste the opportunity. So whenever I get an interview, whether it's a small local band or whether it's a national touring band or an international touring band or something in between all of that, I treat them the same. I talk with them the same way. I try to have a conversation. I try to allow the audience to understand them a little bit. I try to have the listening audience understand what goes into a song, even if it's a particular song. What went into that? What led you to creating that? What is the band all about? How did you get together? A lot of things that would fill up a good amount of time. Now, the show that I create is roughly an hour long, usually less to fit into a station's clock, a public radio station's clock. Usually, made that long. Since recently, the public radio funding has been cut, and no radio stations really are looking for a lot of new stuff. I let the interview take its natural course, and whatever it is, whatever length it will be, will be. It doesn't get outrageously long. I'll never allow it to get outrageously long. But I try to introduce the listener to the band. And I try to introduce the listener to a particular song I like. I try to introduce the listener to, yes, maybe there's a new album, or maybe there's a classic album that needs to be talked about, even though it's been talked about endlessly by other people. The talk about that old album is the same inane talk for the last 40 years about that album. I have something new to ask. I have something new that I want to know. And that's always been the case. That's the way I treat every guest. That's the way I treat the show. That is why I created Up Close and Acoustic. I know what I don't like to hear on the radio. I try to create a show that I do like. Yes, when I do a remote, I want somebody on the other end of the computer, phone, whatever, to sound good. Because yes, I do want to create the theater of the mind for a listener that, oh, these two are in the same studio together. Now, to the musician on the other end, well, they've done so many interviews, maybe that doesn't matter. I want it to matter to them because I want them to be heard clearly. I want them to hear new to them, perhaps, hopefully, questions for them, possibly coming from a different angle, possibly coming from a non-fan standpoint, but a fan of music standpoint. I want them to be heard clearly by the listening audience. I created Up Close and Acoustic to be different, to be informative, to be entertaining, for the listener to have the experience of sharing a communal moment with a band or with a creator or a songwriter or a singer-songwriter, what have you. I want that connection between listener and performer. I want it because it's so lacking in every radio show that I ever hear that has a live guest. I will always include a live performance from my guest, anywhere from 1 to 6 songs, and anything in between. I will mix in something from a new release, an old release, something that I like, something that they like and want people to hear more of. I mean, I heard Al Stewart want to hear a particular song for an interview I did with him that nobody on the radio, he said, as far as he knew, never played. And I said, certainly, I'll do that. I'll play it. No problem. I mean, the guy was asking to have somebody play the song. And as far as he knew, nobody ever played it. It was Al Stewart. Got to play it. So, I mean, it's all about something like that, a moment like that, to have somebody come in and enjoy the show, whether it's here at Up Close and Acoustic HQ or online, or in the old days, if they would come into the little stations that I worked at, I tried to treat them as if they were important, that I knew that what they were talking about, that I knew their music, their background. I did all that all the time. I did not have a staff. And yet, in the day, I used to record 4 to 5 days a week. I did it exactly the way people at a big radio station in Philadelphia used to do it, but I did it myself. And often I did it at home. And I would have people come over to the house. I'd have lunch waiting for them and say, okay, let's get busy after we had something to eat. Because often they were on the road traveling. I wanted to create a show that I didn't hear on the radio. There are some good podcasts nowadays that serve a similar purpose. I still think I'm pretty good at it and better at it than a lot. Of course, I've had 21 years to practice. So yeah, maybe that is part of the reason, but the overarching reason is I'm always prepared. I'm always welcoming. I always know what I want to talk about, but I leave room for what the guest wants to talk about. And yes, if they want to plug something new, that is absolutely great and fine, and what radio should be, or what a podcast should be. But I also want to know, well, what's behind that? Why is that? Why did you create that? How did you create that? How many people worked with you? Was it a solo project that you created by yourself? And then when you're on the road, you travel with a band to recreate that. I want to know all of that. That's what Up Close and Acoustic is about. That's what it's always been about. And it was brought into being by all the radio shows that fell so far short and shouldn't have. They should never have fallen as short as they did. They never should have gotten rewarded by having a syndicated program that went out to 200 plus stations, because it was not hosted well. Production was good, but if you've heard the outtakes of the production, you know, like somebody was tearing their hair out trying to fix that show. I've heard the outtakes. My outtakes, which do exist, it's usually just me talking too much. I never have a problem finishing a sentence. I never have a problem asking a question. I rarely fumfer about, although I might have during this video. I would have normally edit all of that out, all the ums and uhs. Hopefully I never say like anymore, but if I did, apologies. All of that stuff should not happen. All of that stuff is a crutch. I try to get rid of that crutch a long time ago. But I aspire to be better. I aspire for my show to be the best as far as long form conversation, as far as live performance, as far as welcoming a band or a songwriter or a performer into my home to record this show, or remotely. I know what I didn't like. I try to avoid what I didn't like. And I try to give you, the people who listen to this show, Up Close and Acoustic, what I do like. And I promise That is all I've ever done and will ever do. And thanks for listening. I know I'm rambling. That's what I do. I talk a lot. That's why I do this. It's one of the reasons. But another one is I love the music and I want to hear what the people who create the music want to say. I don't want to ask them inane questions that they've been asked 1,000 times. But I also want to ask something that they're maybe not expecting for once. Something maybe that they really do want to talk about. Something that nobody else gets around to. That's what I want to do. And that's what I try to do for you if you listen to Up Close and Acoustic. Please go to prx.org. Search Up Close and Acoustic on PRX. I'll be the first result that you find. Give the show a listen. If you have to sign up for a free, and it's free, a free subscription to listen to the show, just do that. And see what you like. See if you like what I do with the various kinds of bands that I talk to, because they're all different. I try to mix it up as best I can. Anyhow, thank you for listening to me tell you about what Up Close and Acoustic is all about. I hope you like it. I hope you give it a listen. If you haven't ever done it before, give it a shot. Pick out one or two shows from the list of like 70, like I said, 70 shows that are available to listen on demand. I've done over 500. There's about 70 on demand that you can listen to right now. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Upcloseandacoustic@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.